Welcome to Chapter 2, Lose Weight Without Hunger. This program is called Chapter 2 because it is like a second chapter in your life, with Chapter 1 being the old way of eating and Chapter 2 being the new way of eating. My name is Tonya Sneed. I'm excited to have this opportunity to teach you how to lose weight without hunger. I am certified in plant-based nutrition through eCornell, which is Cornell University's online program. I also was a 2012 participant in Dr. John McDougall's 10-day live-in program in Santa Rosa, California, and am a member of Julie Marie Christensen's Protective Diet program. Before doing this diet, I was a junk foodaholic. I could make a meal out of candy bars and potato chips. I used to drink 5 to 6 cans of soda a day. Just 5 years ago, I never would have dreamed that I could be so passionate about a healthy diet, but this diet is amazing. I love the fact that I don't have to go around feeling half-starved as I did on past diets. I love that I have lost weight and that I have maintained my weight loss without ever having to be hungry. I love how this diet makes me feel. This diet has so much promise for so many people who simply don't know about it. They've just never heard of it. It's such good news, and I'm thrilled to share it. After watching this program, I hope that you won't hesitate to contact me through my website with any questions or feedback. I'd love to hear from you and help you in any way that I can. I can tell you that this way of eating absolutely works. It lets you lose weight while eating until you're full. And as a bonus, if you have health issues related to your weight and/or diet, this program can provide amazing results. For instance, you can lower your cholesterol and your blood pressure, and you can reduce or eliminate your need for certain medications. In fact, because this program is so powerful, it's critically important that if you're currently on medications, that you first visit your doctor and let him or her know that you plan to pursue this diet. Your need for medication can change quickly and dramatically in a short amount of time. But even if you are not on medication, this is a great chance to get all your current numbers, your current weight, blood pressure, cholesterol, blood glucose, etc., so that you have a baseline at the start of this diet. Please note that I'm not a doctor, and the information in this program is not intended as medical advice. It's important that you do not change your diet if you are seriously ill or on medication, except under the care of a medical doctor. The information in this diet program is general and is not to be taken as professional advice for your specific health problems. Any decision you make involving the treatment of illness should include the advice of the medical doctor of your choice. There are essentially 2 ways to lose weight when dieting, with hunger and without hunger. We know about the first way because this is the conventional way of dieting. You're probably familiar with and have even tried some of the popular, profitable diets such as Jenny Craig, Nutrisystem, Weight Watchers, or any other diet program that severely restricts the number of calories we consume. I did these kinds of diets many times in the past. The diets where you get so many calories or so many points a day. I can't tell you how many days I had used up all of my calories by noon. I became more, not less, obsessed with food. Because I was so hungry, I would go to sleep thinking about food. I'd wake up thinking about food. I could keep this up for maybe 3 weeks, and then I'd have a day where I'd binge, and I'd go back to my old way of eating. So my binging day may have looked something like this. Recently, a friend of mine was on such a diet. He lost 60 pounds by restricting his calories. He kept it off for several months, but then later gained it all back. He said, "I was tired of being hungry all the time." The vast majority of people aren't able to maintain weight loss on these types of diets because the calorie restriction causes constant hunger. That's why these diets almost always fail. And that's why they all have to include the legal disclaimer, in tiny print of course, results not typical. It's just too hard to fight against your hunger, day after day, week after week. This is true for all of us. None of us, no matter our size, is designed to be able to fight hunger for very long. If you are one of the millions of people who have tried these diets and have failed to keep the weight off, it's important that you know that it's not your fault. When I say that it's not your fault, I mean that sincerely, but that's not what we've been taught. We've all been conditioned to believe that if someone is overweight, that person is to blame. Society tells us that if someone is overweight, they're lazy, they eat too much junk food, they don't have any willpower or self-control. They just don't try hard enough, and they spend too much time on a couch in front of a TV, eating chips, pizza, and soda instead of exercising and eating healthy foods. Likewise, society tells us that thin people are thin because of their efforts. We've been conditioned to believe that thin people eat a healthy diet, get a lot of exercise, have a great deal of willpower, and live a life of tremendous self-control. But all these stereotypes are myths. Of course, there are some thin people who fit the stereotype, who work out for hours each week, and who eat a healthy diet. But most thin people in the U.S. eat junk food and spend too much time on the couch in front of a TV eating chips, pizza, and soda. Thin people don't have any additional willpower or self-control, and they don't necessarily spend much or any time exercising. So the question is, how are these thin people able to eat the same terrible diet, not exercise, and yet not gain weight? Unlike the rest of us, these naturally thin people won the genetic lottery. They eat small portions of whatever they want and don't gain weight. It's almost like they're on the Jenny Craig program every single day, only unlike the rest of us, they actually feel full after eating a limited number of calories. Our stomachs have what are known as stretch receptors and density receptors. You all know the feeling of being very full. That's these receptors telling your brain to stop eating. Think of these receptors as calorie counters. They inform our brain when we've eaten enough. The naturally thin person's receptors work exceptionally well in modern-day industrialized nations, where we are constantly consuming high-fat, calorically dense foods. The naturally thin person's calorie counting mechanisms keep them from eating too many calories because their body recognizes high-fat, greasy, processed foods as foods that are rich in calories. The naturally thin person isn't refusing food when he or she is hungry. They aren't going around depriving themselves. They simply aren't hungry. They can eat small portions of calorie-rich foods and feel satisfied. For instance, the naturally thin person could eat 500 calories of greasy French fries and feel full. For the rest of us, this isn't true. If we're eating French fries fried in animal or vegetable fats, that may mean that we'll need 1,000 calories of fries or more before we'd feel full. The fact that you still feel hungry after eating a small amount of food isn't a moral failing, and it isn't your fault. Really, it's not. Being overweight isn't about laziness or lack of discipline or lack of willpower or gluttony or any of the things that our culture teaches us. If you are overweight, you are not out of control. Your body has been doing exactly what it was intended to do. It has been responding appropriately to hunger. And fortunately, there's good news for you. There's good news for my friend, and there's good news for anyone struggling with weight issues. We don't have to starve ourselves and eat only tiny portions of food in order to lose weight. We don't have to be hungry all the time. We don't have to be hungry at all. Ever. That's because there's a second way to lose weight when dieting, and that is what this program is all about. Losing weight without hunger. Many people, including myself, have successfully lost weight without hunger. I know what you're thinking. You're assuming that in order to lose weight without being hungry, you are going to be eating nothing but celery. But you would be wrong, because you also get to eat broccoli and cauliflower and a whole lot of other stuff. You get to eat from a bounty of foods. Almost any fruit or vegetable you want. You can eat some of your international favorites like tostadas, nachos, guacamole and chips, spaghetti, lasagna, curry rice and vegetables, sushi, pita pockets, spring rolls. You get to eat comfort foods like mashed potatoes and gravy, macaroni and cheese, creamy potato soup, breaded mushrooms, hash browns, cheesy potatoes, burgers, and fries. You even get to have desserts like blueberry muffins, chocolate pudding, vanilla pudding, banana bread, ice cream, and brownies. You may have noticed that all of these foods I showed you are considered carbs. And what have we been taught about carbs? Carbs make us fat. We have been conditioned to believe this myth that carbs are our enemies. Entire diets have been built around this myth. Some restaurants have sections of their menu dedicated entirely to low-carb options. You can go to the grocery store and find boxed, processed foods that brag that they are low-carb. Well, I'm here to tell you that carbs are not your enemies. They are your friends, and you and I are supposed to be eating them. A lot of them. Now, just to be clear, not all carbs are created equally. I would agree that so-called carbs like donuts and cheesecake will cause weight gain and should be avoided. But we have to remember that carbs in and of themselves are not the problem. It's what we've done to them, and it's what we've put on them. Take wheat, for example. We take a healthy carb and we strip it of its bran. We're left with white flour, which is low in nutritional value and which lacks the fiber that is needed to make us feel full. We then take the white flour, add oil and milk to it, and make things like white bread, to which we add butter, or meat and cheese, and then we try to convince ourselves that it's the wheat that's causing us to gain weight. We have been trained to think of carbs, especially starches like potatoes, corn, and rice, as foods that cause weight gain. But think about it. It's not the potato that causes us to gain weight. It's what we fry the potato in. It's what we put on the potato. An average potato has just 150 calories in it. But after you add butter, cheese, bacon bits, sour cream, or all of the above, that same potato will now have 200 to 500 calories in it. Likewise, it isn't the pasta that's making us gain weight. It's what we put on the pasta, namely oil, meat, and cheese. Think about people from many countries from around the world who have traditionally eaten large quantities of carbs, like rice, potatoes, and wheat, as their staple crops. And yet they traditionally have had a low incidence of obesity until they adopt our Western diet. For instance, rice has been a staple in Asian cultures for centuries. Studies have shown that it's only when Asians abandon their carb-based diet and adopt our fat-laden, protein-heavy Western diet that they have to contend with weight gain and diseases of affluence, such as heart disease, cancer, and diabetes. Migration studies show us that initially when people move to the U.S., they tend to maintain their traditional diet. But over time, and especially with succeeding generations who have been born in the U.S., they begin to replace traditional foods with the high-fat standard American diet, otherwise known as SAD. What these migrants have given up is a low-fat, carb-based diet. The fact that these immigrants to the U.S. tend to gain weight has nothing to do with genetics. Their genes didn't change, their diet changed. And what causes their weight gain is the same thing that causes our weight gain. The problem isn't the carbs, it's the fat, which I'll explain in more detail in a moment. The diet I'm promoting is the same diet promoted by Dr. John McDougall. Dr. McDougall has written several books. One I highly recommend is The Starch Solution. If you go to Dr. McDougall's website, you can find a long list of people who have had success in losing weight and in reversing serious health issues on this diet. Dr. McDougall is a big fan of carbs, especially potatoes, and he encourages people to eat lots of potatoes. One of the followers of the McDougall diet listed on the website is Mike Tehan, who writes about how he initially didn't believe Dr. McDougall. He didn't believe that he really could eat lots of potatoes and still lose weight. Mike says he thought, yeah, right, I'll show him. So he goes to the store and buys 10 pounds of potatoes, cooks them up, eats them, and soon after starts losing weight. He ultimately loses about half his weight and now weighs 165 pounds. So for any of you who have been depriving yourselves of carbs unnecessarily, let me give you this inspirational message from Oprah Winfrey. Seriously now, stop worrying about healthy carbs. Not only will healthy carbs not make us fat, it's absolutely vital that we eat them. Our body's optimal fuel is carbohydrates. Our optimal fuel is not protein or fats. Just like a car needs fuel to run, our bodies need fuel to function. For cars, that fuel is gasoline, and for humans, that fuel is glucose, which is a simple sugar that our bodies use for energy and literally cannot function without. So where does glucose come from? The optimal source is carbohydrates. It's a scientific fact that our bodies easily convert carbohydrates into glucose, but it's much more difficult for our bodies to convert protein or fat into glucose. For example, our bodies only convert protein into glucose under extreme conditions, such as when we are starving. Professional athletes like Olympian Carl Lewis already know the importance of carbohydrates. Carl Lewis set the world record for the 100-meter dash, won 2 gold medals, and had the best long jump series of his career while following the McDougall diet. Think about what runners eat the night before a race. They're not eating steaks and chicken wings. They load up on things like pasta because carbs won't weigh them down and can easily provide them the energy they need for an endurance event. Now, some of you may be concerned that you could eat too many carbs, but not to worry. Even if we consume more carbs than we need for energy, it's very difficult for our bodies to store excess carbs as fat. We store a couple of pounds of carbs as easily accessed fuel reserves in the form of glycogen, and most of the remaining carbs get burned off as heat. It is possible for your body to convert a small amount of excess carbs into body fat, but on this diet, the carbs you'll be eating are so full of fiber that you'll feel full long before you can consume too many carbs. Whereas it's difficult for our bodies to convert carbs into fat, our bodies effortlessly store dietary fat as body fat. It doesn't matter if we eat a tiny amount of fat or a large amount of fat. Our body is programmed to store it all as fat. To make things very simple for you, the fat you eat is the fat you wear. If you remember nothing else, this is the essence of this diet. Now, this may be confusing because of conflicting information. We had a low-fat craze in this country, and in general, people did not lose weight and did not experience improvements in their health when they started eating quote-unquote low-fat foods that were heavily marketed at that time. It's true. People didn't lose weight because the diets they were on and the foods they were eating were not low-fat. The problem was that low-fat was being defined as 30% fat. However, the reality is that a food that is 30% fat is still a high-fat food, and a diet that is 30% fat is still a high-fat diet. For that matter, a 20% fat diet is a high-fat diet. Even today, most medical organizations define low fat as anywhere from 20 to 35% fat. This definition of low fat has made the term almost meaningless. A true low-fat diet is under 10% fat. The key to losing weight without hunger is to avoid fat and to fill up on healthy, whole foods that are high in fiber and minimally processed. With the diet I'm promoting, you'll effortlessly be consuming less than 10% of your calories in fat, and all of those fats will be naturally occurring within whole foods. So what foods am I talking about? If you follow some basic parameters, you can eat all you want of these things. You get to eat all you want of fruits with a few exceptions. Note that unlike fresh or frozen fruits, dried fruits are a concentrated source of calories because the water has been removed. And note that the majority of calories in olives and avocados come from fat, so you will want to avoid them. Now you get to eat all the non-starchy and starchy vegetables you want. The non-starchy vegetables such as spinach, peppers, cucumbers, and green beans are exceptionally low in calories. They likely won't fill you up, but they have important nutrients, and their low calories and high fiber will aid you in losing weight. You should definitely eat a lot of these. The starchy vegetables, grains, and legumes will form the bulk of your diet and will keep you satiated for hours. Starchy vegetables are things such as potatoes, sweet potatoes, and squash. Grains are foods such as corn, quinoa, and rice. And finally, there's legumes like beans and lentils. I've listed just a few examples of each type of food, but note that there are many more. Now, if you're looking at this list and thinking, I don't like most of these foods. You should know that our taste buds can and do change if we let them. For instance, I used to hate onions and peppers, but after removing added fats from my diet, my taste buds really did change, and now I love onions and peppers. So don't get hung up on the idea that you won't ever enjoy any of these foods. I promise that if you remove the high-fat processed foods from your diet, your taste buds will change, and you will enjoy many foods that today are not appealing to you. Now, there's no need to worry that you won't get enough protein, calcium, iron, or fat. This diet will provide more than enough. You will get all the vitamins and minerals you need, with perhaps one exception. There is only one supplement that is recommended, vitamin B12. B12 is not made by animals. It is produced by bacteria in the soil. But in our overly sanitized, industrialized world, we do things like triple wash our produce and remove nearly every trace of soil and B12. But we can easily get our B12 from a supplement. B12 deficiency is extremely rare, but nevertheless, just to be on the safe side, a B12 supplement is recommended. Dr. McDougall recommends taking one tablet with 500 micrograms of B12 each week. This is the only vitamin I take. They're inexpensive and they are an incredibly small price for all the benefits that you'll get from this diet. I've had my B12 levels checked and they're fine. If you have concerns, you can get your levels checked with a simple blood test. Now, this is a list of the foods that you need to avoid if you want to lose weight without hunger. Note that no added vegetable oils are allowed, including olive oil, coconut oil, and cooking sprays. All plant oils are 100% fat. Remember, the fat you eat is the fat you wear. Now, you also want to stay away from very high-fat plant foods such as nuts, seeds, avocados, and olives. Raw nuts aren't unhealthy in small quantities, but most of us aren't able to eat just a few, so it's better to just avoid them for weight loss purposes. Note that all animal products have fat, including so-called no-fat and low-fat versions of animal products. There's no such thing as a lean piece of meat. The fat is part and parcel of the meat. Some fat you can see, such as the white portion that you can cut off, but much of the fat in meat cannot be extracted. There are lower fat versions of some of these products, but even egg whites, skim milk, and so-called no-fat yogurt still contain fat. There are a lot of no-fat foods that do have fat in them. It's just that the USDA allows the manufacturers to make the serving size so small that they don't have to list the fat contained in each serving. However, the fat doesn't disappear just because it isn't listed on the packaging. Remember, the fat you eat is the fat you wear. Certainly fat occurs naturally in plant foods, but plant foods also have a lot of fiber. Animal products and vegetable oils have no fiber, which means that you'll take in many more calories and much more fat before becoming full if you're eating these. If you've been eating a standard American diet, I know it's a big change to eliminate all vegetable oils and animal products, but including vegetable oils and animal products in your diet will make losing weight without hunger impossible. Again, this is because all vegetable oils are 100% fat, and all animal products contain fat. And as I said repeatedly, the fat you eat is the fat you wear. Juice, soda, and sweeteners like sugar are high in calories and lack fiber. It's the fiber that makes you feel full. It would be very difficult to lose weight without hunger if you're consuming these. Dried fruits are a very concentrated source of calories that will sabotage your weight loss. I suppose this list might be a little confusing to you because I told you that you would still get to eat things like mashed potatoes and gravy. You will get to eat mashed potatoes and gravy, only your mashed potatoes and gravy won't have butter, sour cream, animal fat, or cow's milk in it. You will still get to eat ice cream, but your ice cream won't have added fats in it. You will still get to eat fries, but your fries won't be drenched in oil or animal fats. There are many websites that can help you learn how to make your favorite foods without added fats. Two that I highly recommend are that of Dr. John McDougall and Protective Diet. On Dr. McDougall's site, you can access hundreds of free recipes that his wife Mary has created. Protective Diet is a diet plan that is very similar to Dr. McDougall's. On the Protective Diet site, you can find over 100 free recipes that Julie Marie Christensen, pictured here, has created. There are two major hurdles that people have when they learn about this way of eating. The first hurdle is believing that it even works. When I first heard about this, I wasn't sure that it would work either. But one thing that impressed me was reading the many success stories of people who have followed this diet. If you're having doubts, I encourage you to go to Dr. McDougall's and Protective Diet's websites. Spend time looking at the before and after photos and read and listen to the testimonials. It was through Dr. McDougall's site that I first learned about Raymond Kuhl, who has lost 300 pounds. Raymond has struggled with a severe binge eating disorder for most of his life. At his heaviest, Raymond weighed nearly 500 pounds. He asked himself over and over through the years, even through the decades, what is wrong with me? Why do I have such an insatiable appetite? Is there something wrong with me, physically, emotionally, or psychologically? Raymond believes that the standard American diet set him up for an eating disorder. It wasn't until he switched to a low-fat, plant-based diet that he was able to experience tremendous success. Success that he wasn't able to achieve on any other diet. Raymond states, "The power of a starch-based diet gave me my life back." You can read more about Raymond's journey at raymondkuhl.com. He is happy to provide support to anyone facing similar struggles because he understands what it's like. Now I'm going to explain why this diet works, why it worked for Raymond, and why it will work for you. Why this diet works has a great deal to do with a concept called calorie density. I want to highly recommend this DVD, Calorie Density by Jeff Novick, a dietitian who works alongside Dr. McDougall. I'm going to summarize some of the key concepts, but his video will give you a more thorough explanation. It was an eye-opener for me, and I think you'd appreciate its content as well. This is a calorie density chart, which shows the number of calories in a certain weight of food. Calorie density charts generally compare foods in terms of calories per pound. I don't want you to think that I'm suggesting you count calories, but I want you to be aware of which foods are the least and most calorically dense, and how they compare to each other. Now, I know we don't necessarily eat food by the pound, so we could convert this chart to calories per ounce or to any other serving size, and the only thing that would change would be the numbers. The order that the foods are listed would stay the same, and the ratios would remain constant. For instance, as you can see, vegetables average about 100 calories per pound, and oil averages a whopping 4,000 calories per pound. So no matter how we slice this, oil is 40 times more calorically dense than vegetables. We know through research that overweight people who eat a diet that averages 300 calories per pound or less can eat all they want and lose weight without restricting calories and without exercise. As you can see, if your diet is limited to the items above the red line, you can easily average 300 calories per pound by doing things like mixing rice with vegetables. So on this program, what you want to do is center your diet around starches, but add in lots of vegetables and some fruit for flavor and for additional nutrients. This will help you maintain a 300 calorie per pound average. Now, a few things that we do allow on this diet that are below the red line are corn tortillas, whole wheat bread, and air-popped popcorn. We allow these because they are healthy, and due to their high fiber content, they will help you feel full on fewer calories. So on occasion, it's okay to have some, say, Ezekiel bread, or to even make some homemade bread. But if you're serious about weight loss, you wouldn't want to eat bread every single day. Corn tortillas, whole grain flour, and popcorn are carbs, and like other carbs, scientifically speaking, your body will have a difficult time converting these to body fat. However, these items should be consumed with some caution because if you consume a lot, their high calorie density could prevent you from losing weight. They wouldn't likely cause you to gain weight, but they could stunt your weight loss, especially if you're close to the weight range for your height. Now, you will want to avoid sugar. It is essentially a junk food, is heavily processed, and doesn't have any fiber. It's not going to aid you in losing weight. I would recommend that you avoid dry cereals as they are calorie dense, making it easy to overeat these foods. There are some dry cereals out there that are made of whole grains that don't have added sugar, corn syrup, or oils, but dry cereals are generally high in calories, and I think you'd be better off with a bowl of oatmeal and fruit instead. Fiber is the second part of why this diet works. This diet works because you're going to be eating lots of fiber, which mixed with water in our bodies creates bulk, which in turn creates a sense of fullness. You are going to feel full on fewer calories, and the fiber will keep you full for hours. This chart gives some specific examples of the foods on the previous chart and lists how much fiber is contained in 100 calories of these foods. So you may notice that the things you are encouraged to eat on this diet are all full of fiber, including the higher calorie items like whole wheat flour and popcorn. It's because these items are so high in fiber that you can include them in your diet. On the flip side, note that the foods I'm telling you to stay away from have very little to no fiber. I've stated this before, but it's worth repeating. All animal products and all vegetable oils contain zero fiber, which explains why we need to eat large quantities of these items in order to feel full. I was talking to a friend recently and he commented how he can eat a cheeseburger, fries, and soda from a fast food restaurant and yet be hungry an hour later. There's a reason for this. It's because he isn't consuming enough fiber to maintain a sense of fullness. Now what I'm about to show you is a rather simplified version of the very elaborate and rather complicated processes that take place in our stomachs and throughout our bodies when we eat. That being said, I think this illustration will help you grasp how and why this diet is so effective. These three stomachs have the same amount of calories. Let's assume for illustrative purposes that the three people with these three stomachs have the exact same number of stretch and density receptors. Note that the oil and chicken are calorie dense and have absolutely no fiber. The vegetables are full of fiber. Now I should point out that 400 calories of oil would be less than 3.5 tablespoons of oil. 400 calories of chicken equals just 2 legs of a chicken. And as for 400 calories of salad, I made one. Just so you have an idea of the scale here, I'm holding the salad bowl. For those of us who didn't win the genetic stretch receptor lottery, you can see how the people with the stomachs on the left and in the middle are going to feel hungry and require more calories in order to feel full. However, the person on the right, who just had a giant salad, is completely full on a small amount of calories. It's nearly impossible to overeat on this diet because you'll be eating very high fiber foods. You will feel a sense of fullness long before you will have eaten too many calories. For instance, let's compare a low-fiber food with a high-fiber food. This pint of Haagen-Dazs, which is technically less than a true pint, has almost no fiber and contains 1,050 calories. Now, we're not suggesting you sit around and just eat carrots. Almost no one would want to do that, right? But for the sake of illustration, compare 1,050 calories of Haagen-Dazs ice cream to 1,050 calories of high-fiber carrots. Note it takes 42 average-sized carrots to add up to 1,050 calories. Which one will make you feel full? The pint of ice cream or the 42 carrots? Obviously, you would get full with the carrots long before you will have eaten 1,050 calories worth of them, whereas many people would still be hungry even after eating the entire 1,050 calories of ice cream. A large order of McDonald's French fries has 510 calories. Compare this to 510 calories worth of baked fries. That's 6 ounces versus 20 ounces. Which one is going to fill you up first? Obviously, the 510 calories of baked fries has a better chance of filling you up. But if you instead eat the McDonald's fries, they likely won't fill you, and you'll want to eat something else as well. So the first hurdle is people don't believe this works, but you can see that this is basic math. Fiber matters because you will be full after taking in fewer calories. You can see that the fiber fills you up, and that you are going to get full eating high fiber foods. You can also see that replacing low-fiber, calorie-dense foods with high-fiber, low-calorie foods will allow you to lose weight without hunger. The effortless weight loss that comes from consuming high-fiber, low-calorie foods is part of the magic of this diet. So now you have a basic understanding of why this diet works. For many people, the knowledge of why this diet works, though, isn't enough. They have to see the numbers on the scale go down in order to believe that this diet is effective. So I want to encourage you to commit to this diet and see for yourself that it can and does work. Depending on how close someone is to a healthy weight, the average person who commits to this diet loses 4 to 10 pounds per month. Now, the second major hurdle is an even more difficult one and is the hurdle that tripped me up, and that is believing that you can ever overcome your cravings for the standard American diet foods you've been eating your whole life. that you can ever truly find enjoyment in foods that don't give us near the amount of pleasure that peanut butter parfaits do. Indeed, this was the major hurdle for me. I read enough of the success stories that I was convinced that the diet worked, but I didn't believe that I could ever be happy eating this way. I was certain that I would be miserable, but I was wrong. I assure you that if you commit to this diet, you not only will lose weight, but you will also come to love this way of eating. Something that helped me immensely was the DVD and book entitled The Pleasure Trap. The Pleasure Trap is the brainchild of Drs. Doug Lisle and Alan Goldhammer. I'm going to summarize some of the main points, but I highly recommend the book and/or DVD if you'd like to learn more. The pleasure trap is a state of being in which you are addicted to substances or activities that result in intense, short-lived pleasure at the expense of your long-term health and happiness. When you are in the pleasure trap, you are controlled by an unrelenting desire for unsustainable and harmful pleasure. This is true of drug addicts, sex addicts, gambling addicts, and anyone regularly consuming the standard American diet. Now, we're all supposed to be living in the normal pleasure zone. We're supposed to be eating healthy, low-fat foods and engaging in healthful activities, such as spending time with friends and enjoying fulfilling work. Substances and activities that give us normal levels of pleasure contribute to our long-term happiness. We all want to avoid being in the no-pleasure zone. Being down there feels absolutely miserable. We're not meant to feel this way. People who are experiencing famine or drug withdrawal would be in this no-pleasure zone. We should also want to avoid the pleasure trap, but instead, most of us are living in it. The pleasure trap is a state of unnaturally high pleasure that we are not meant to experience. This pleasure comes from harmful addictive substances or activities that sabotage our long-term happiness. When we're stuck in the pleasure trap, our tolerance for pleasure increases, so that what initially felt like intensified pleasure now feels like normal pleasure. In other words, it's the level of pleasure we have come to expect, and it's how we think we're supposed to feel. For instance, take a person who is addicted to cocaine. That person is stuck in the pleasure trap. When the person first started using cocaine, it gave him incredibly intense pleasure. Again, it's a pleasure that we were never designed to feel. With repeated use, it still gives him pleasure, but not as much. It becomes normalized. It gives the addict a normal level of pleasure rather than the exaggerated pleasure that it once gave. Indeed, the cocaine becomes a need for the addict. As it was once described to me, the need for a powerful drug is like having to go pee. It's no longer about getting a high. It's a release. It's something the addict must have. Without it, the addict will experience severe withdrawal. He will drop down to no pleasure and feel miserable. As I previously stated, if you are presently consuming SAD, you are in the pleasure trap. And this is true of anyone eating SAD, no matter their weight. This means that you are living your life at the top of the chart in intensified pleasure. We should all be eating a whole foods, plant-based diet, and we should all be getting normal pleasure from eating these foods. We should be able to eat a bowl full of sweet, juicy grapes and think, I really enjoy this. However, when the grapes are competing with a milkshake in our modern world, of course the milkshake is going to win that contest. Healthy foods that should give us a normal degree of pleasure can't possibly compete with the artificially intensified pleasure that we get from unhealthy foods. Unhealthy foods should be rare, but in modern-day societies and industrialized nations, unhealthy foods are the bulk of what is consumed. To paraphrase Dr. John McDougall, every day is a feast in the United States. We have Easter for breakfast, Christmas for lunch, Thanksgiving for dinner, and then our birthday for dessert. Anyone eating SAD is living in an intense, extreme pleasure zone. It's very exaggerated. It's not just a little unhealthy. Even if we're not yet aware of the damage, SAD is actually devastating to us and to our bodies. We have developed a tolerance for it, much like an alcoholic develops a tolerance for alcohol. Maybe the first time we ever ate a Snickers bar, we were delighted by the taste of it. But over time, we lose our sensitivity to fats in our diet, and we want more and more fats. Over time, we normalize intensified pleasure and we come to expect it. These foods are not normal and they are incapable of making us happy, but they do give us a great deal of short-term pleasure. Like the cocaine addict, we've turned intense pleasure into normal pleasure. And foods that should give us normal pleasure now give us little to no pleasure. Consider how you feel when you eat these. An apple versus chocolate cake. For many of you, the chocolate cake will feel like normal pleasure, and in comparison, the apple feels like little to no pleasure. Or consider a banana versus a cheeseburger. In terms of pleasure, a banana can't begin to compete with a cheeseburger. When you switch to this diet, bananas and apples are never going to give you as much pleasure as chocolate cake or cheeseburgers, but bananas and apples will eventually give you much more pleasure than they do now. So yes, when we give up our addiction to sad foods and we switch to the Chapter 2 diet, we are initially going to feel a great deal of deprivation. At first, what we should experience as normal pleasure is going to feel like no pleasure. Apples and bananas should feel like normal pleasure, but because we have normalized intensified pleasure, switching from a high-fat to a low-fat diet is going to feel like switching from normal pleasure to no pleasure. It will feel like withdrawal. But don't worry. Breaking our addiction to sad foods is nothing like breaking a drug addiction. Fortunately, unlike some drugs, sad foods don't destroy circuitry in our brains. In fact, for all intents and purposes, our attraction to sad foods is not a true addiction in the purest sense of the word. It can take years and years for drug addicts to overcome their addictions. A Facebook friend of mine wrote not too long ago, "I gave up cigarettes 1 year ago today, and you know what? I'm craving a cigarette just as much today as I was on the first day I quit." Now, obviously, not every person who gives up smoking has that experience, but I submit to you that giving up cigarettes is a much more difficult task than giving up sad foods. Unlike a true addiction, which can take several years to overcome and can include severe withdrawal and detox, our cravings for sad foods can be overcome in a short amount of time. The task before you is challenging, but quite attainable, and it's attainable because your taste buds can and do change quickly. Research shows that it only takes up to 3 months to train our taste buds to like healthy foods. If we stop eating sad foods completely and replace them with wholesome foods, we will crave the new foods within 3 months. Let me give you an example of how easy it is to get our taste buds to change. Some of you may have had the experience of switching from whole milk to 2% milk or from 2% milk to skim milk. You may remember that at first you didn't like the change. The skim milk tasted like water and wasn't satisfying, but eventually you got accustomed to the new milk and you eventually liked the taste of it. But note this only happened if you completely eliminated the higher fat milk. As long as you kept drinking the higher fat milk, even if only occasionally, the skim milk continued to taste too watery to you. Or some of you may have switched from regular soda to diet soda. At first you might not have cared so much for the diet soda, but over time you found yourself enjoying it. Of course, I'm not suggesting that skim milk and diet soda are healthy. They absolutely should never be consumed. I'm simply giving you examples of how you may have already reprogrammed your taste buds. Even though it only takes up to 3 months to change your taste buds, those 3 months can be difficult. If you've been living in the pleasure trap and have normalized the pleasure you get from high-fat foods, healthy, low-fat foods will initially feel like no pleasure. At first, the food may taste boring and blah. You may temporarily have digestive issues as your body gets accustomed to all the fiber. You will not find much pleasure with this diet in the beginning. None of this will be a reason to quit. Some people will have strong cravings for certain sad foods that they'll misinterpret as a sign that their body needs those foods, but that is not the case at all. It is a myth that our body's cravings for a certain food is an indication of a need for that food. We might crave potato chips, for example, but potato chips obviously aren't healthy. Likewise, if you're craving steak or cheese, your body does not know best. So the fact that you might have cravings for high-fat foods for several weeks and up to 3 months is not a sign that your body was not meant for this diet. If you are having these cravings, it's simply because you switched from intensified pleasure to normal pleasure, and it may feel like no pleasure until your taste buds have had adequate time to change. So when you switch to this way of eating, you may not find your food pleasurable for several weeks, but then, trust me, You will wake up one day and you will have this revelation that you really like these foods. You will have grown accustomed to the new foods, and suddenly, almost out of nowhere, you'll discover that plant foods will be giving you normal pleasure. For me, eating healthy, whole foods such as blueberries, bananas, salads, corn, and potatoes, especially mashed potatoes, makes me happy. I like how I feel. I like that I've lost weight. I like the improvements in my health. I have a better outlook on life. There's scientific evidence that healthy, low-fat whole foods positively affect our mood, so it's no wonder that I feel happier eating this way. Most people eating SAD assume that they would suffer on a whole foods plant-based diet, that they would not enjoy it, and that they would not enjoy their lives. Most people can't imagine a better life on such quote-unquote bland foods. I get it. I get it because that was me. I never imagined myself craving pineapple. But trust me, if you commit to this, within a matter of a few short months, you'll find that you really enjoy eating this way, and you'll be happy with the results you'll be experiencing. Social support can be an incredible asset with any major lifestyle change. I would encourage you to reach out to others who have done or are doing this diet. Perhaps see if you can find a friend to do this program with you, and I'd really encourage you to join these two Facebook groups, McDougall Friends and Protective Diet Living. There are hundreds of people doing the diet that I've laid out, and you can ask questions and get answers, usually within the hour. People are constantly sharing recipes, ideas, and suggestions. You'll see lots of success stories with before and after pictures, and you'll read about some people's struggles and what they're doing to overcome them. Through these Facebook groups, you can converse with people who have been successful. Unlike many marketed diet programs, which cause you to wonder if the model or the actress really lost weight doing the diet, you can regularly interact with people who have reached their weight goals doing this diet. For instance, you can learn about Denise. Denise follows the Protective Diet program. In addition to losing weight, she has resolved migraines, GERD, depression, and prediabetes. She writes, "If I can do it, anyone can. Just start today where you are." Allison lost 60 pounds, going from 178 to 118. She insists, "I never calorie restrict, ever." She also writes, "One of my favorite things about this way of eating is no more oily hair and skin. No more greasy, stringy mess of hair at the end of the day. It's amazing. 60 pounds gone forever. Thank you, Dr. McDougall. Fat-free baked fries and salad for dinner tonight. My favorite." Mylan has lost 265 pounds. A major catalyst for him losing weight was wanting to be healthy and trim for the sake of his son, Nigel. Mylan follows Dr. Scott Stoll's diet plan, which is yet another low-fat plant-based diet program in the same category as that of Dr. McDougall and Protective Diet. Along with his doctor, Mylan has written a book about his transformation titled The Change. As you explore these Facebook groups, you will find that the low-fat plant-based movement is a growing one, with more and more people, including doctors and other medical professionals, getting on board. Mylan, Allison, and Denise were all able to lose weight without tiny portions and without going hungry. Countless people have been successful on this diet, and you can be too. Other resources that can be very helpful are the books and DVDs, which I've already mentioned. I'd especially recommend the books. There's research that shows that if you read a diet book, you're more likely to follow that diet. I recommend, too, that you visit my website, which has links to additional resources which you might find helpful. You can contact me through my website to receive a free guide with tips and suggestions to help you succeed on this diet. As just one example, one tip that's going to help you with your cravings is something that I can't stress enough. Don't let yourself get too hungry. Plan ahead. If you're hungry, even a little bit, go eat another potato. You'll still lose weight, I promise. In the beginning, it's absolutely critical that you do not let yourself go hungry, because it's at those times that you'll be the most tempted by sad foods. If you decide to follow this diet and lifestyle, I would love to hear from you. Please don't hesitate to contact me. You can find my contact information on my website, which has links to both my email and my Chapter 2 Facebook page. And finally, I just want to encourage you. You can do this. I wish you the best on this next chapter of your life.